Hello and welcome to the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. I'm Amanda Butland, your host and intuitive life coach.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast. Today, my special guest is Polly Betzner-Walshin. Polly, I'm so excited to have you on today. So Polly is the author of You Got Daddy Issues and also in the documentary The Invisible Pilot. And I'm so excited to have you on today.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so before we actually dive in, I'm going to ask you my little
Okay.
icebreaker question. Um, would you
Sure.
mind sharing with us what activity or hobby brings you the most joy and why?
I was really thinking about this. I I get most joy. Our church goes and feeds the homeless like all the time, and we get to pray for people downtown. And so I take like whatever clothes I have and dog food, and it brings me the most joy because you see the need, you see what people need, and they need prayer too. They need direction. They just need hope. And like I leave, and I'm like, wow, like I'm really blessed. Like I have a home to live in. I have food on the table. Like whether it was their choice by their choice or not, doesn't matter. They're just in a really bad place. And like, and that brings me the most joy.
I love that. Yes, absolutely being able to serve others and just having the gratitude for what you do have. Wow, amazing. I
Yeah.
love that so
Yeah.
much. All right, so we are going to just dive right in. And, being the author of the book that you've written, and I think you've written two books at this point now, but I would love for you to maybe share the journey that brought you to where you are today. What was it that inspired you to write your book, and
Yeah.
well, your first book maybe? What inspired you to write your book, your first one, and all the things that came with that. So, would you mind sharing with us that story?
Wow. Okay. Well, I can share from like backwards going forward. So I really only wrote like one book. I wrote the first book was just called Daddy Issues, which there's like 5,000 books called Daddy Issues. And my publisher I had then, like I didn't know what I was doing. And she just took all the money and I never knew about it and it never anything happened with it. So I actually wrote the second book, which is the same thing called You Got Daddy Issues, which is this book. Um, and so it was definitely a learning experience, but how I got to actually where I wrote the book was I can tell my story. You want me to tell my story about my dad?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
please do.
So my dad was the largest drug smuggler ever in US history, ever. And my parents were divorced when I was little, and my dad kind of got into dealing drugs and stuff. And then when I was on my seventh birthday, um, I got the pastor came to our house when I was a little girl and they knocked on the door and I thought it was my actual birthday. And I thought that he was coming to give me a present, but he was coming to tell me that my dad killed himself. And so like as a 7-year old, I just thought, wow, my life's over. Like my dad killed himself. I didn't really understand as a 7-year old. Like I didn't get it. Like, and it just kind of created this like pit in my stomach. Like what is wrong with me? Why would he do it on my birthday? Like as a little girl, I didn't comprehend it, but I definitely put that in my subconscious. And so through all those years, for a long time, my mom was a single mom in Memphis, Tennessee. She helped start Federal Express. She worked really hard in the 70s. She didn't have any child support from my dad. We were super involved in church, but I was like really like a lost kid. I just didn't understand what had happened. And we had these like cartel members, and now I know they were cartel members, come to our house once. They followed me from Wendy's, um, and they got our license plate number. This was in the 70s. And they came to our house. My mom was like, how did you find our address? And they were like, oh, we were just really concerned. We went to the DMV. Like, we want a picture of your daughter. Mom's like, that's weird. And so she's like, she started sleeping with a gun under her pillow after that. And so like I had like my school got locked down once, but my dad was supposedly dead. And so when I turned almost 15, I was in Arkansas because I'm originally from Arkansas, but I lived in Memphis. And I read on the front page of the newspaper, it said, Gary Wayne Betzner indicted for the possession of 1,000 kilos of cocaine in Lake City, Florida. So my dad was like Lazarus and he arose from the dead. And I had to found out in a newspaper. So that was pretty terrifying. Like as a kid. You want me to keep going and tell you the
Yeah.
rest? So, so my mom, like a good little Southern mom, took me to Jacksonville, Florida to see him in prison. And he was handcuffed and chained. And I was like, I thought my dad was dead for like almost 10 years. Like, you need to uncuff my dad so I can hug him. I really want to hug my dad. So they did, and I got to hug him. And then from that point forward, my mom would take me to every federal prison for like the next 10, 12 years to visit him in prison. And over those years, I began to find out what really happened. So what really happened was, in the documentary, which is also connected to the book, which came out at the same time as the book, called The Invisible Pilot. And if you want to watch it, it's crazy. So he was caught on a drug charge. And so he faked his death jumping off the bridge. And he helped his wife he was married to went into hypnosis. And she believed that when she heard this sound that went over the bridge, that she would go into this hypnotic state and believe that he was really dead. But he didn't. He got on a motorcycle and became the invisible pilot because he was a crop duster. And then through time, he met Pablo Escobar. He started flying for him. He was his main pilot. And he flew for him for a long time. During that time, he became a huge drug smuggler, like, because he knew how to fly under radar. He was a crop duster. And that's why the documentary is called The Invisible Pilot. And so through all that time of flying for Pablo Escobar, the CIA figured out who he was. And so that's when he got really scared, because they showed up and they knew my name, because my two siblings, half siblings, and my stepmom, they knew about them. But like, I was the hidden one that nobody talked about. It was just my mom and I. And so they showed him pictures of me, like, we visited your daughter. Like, we know where she is. We know when she goes to school. Like, you're going to work for us now. And so he began in the 80s. There was a thing called the Iran Contra scandal. You're a little young, but if you looked it up, his name's Gary Betzner. You could literally look it up. It was on CNN, and he went to trial for it. He was involved in taking the guns down to the Sandinistas and bringing the drugs back. And he did that for a long time until finally they arrested him and he went to prison. So during all those years, that's what he was doing. So it's been like a crazy journey, but through all that is what led me to have my own pain inside. But I was done with that. I'm 55 now. So at 28, how old was I when he got out of prison? Maybe 30 or 28, he got out of prison. 27, he got out of prison. And when he got out, I was just riddled with like so much pain, That's why it took me 25 more years to write the book, because I had to do a lot of coaching, get a lot of coaching. I got so much coaching and help. And, I did a lot of stuff with my church and, inner healing and therapy and life coaching, like, what's wrong with me? And I just made a slew of bad choices. And it all went back to identity, not knowing that it wasn't my fault that he did all those things.
Yeah. Wow, what a story. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm sure you've shared this because you've written a book about it and there's a documentary, but just the vulnerability required to really go and share all this, all this about yourself and what happened with your family. And now being able to sort of share that growth journey, right, with others. Like you mentioned at the beginning of the call, right? Like just being able to give back to others or give to others. Is something that, it feels good to be able to give back. And so I do want to talk a little bit more about sort of that growth journey, right? Having, worked with coaches and therapists and life coaches and things to sort of help to, and I'm sure writing the book was a healing process for you as well, right? To really get it out on the page. And so I would love to maybe hear a little bit more about sort of that, maybe the challenges that you overcame to get to putting that book out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got married when I was 27 and, married somebody a lot like my dad. I hadn't done a lot of coaching. I hadn't done a lot of soul searching. I was a deadhead for years. Like I followed the Grateful Dead and saw like 350 Grateful Dead shows. And I was my mom's nightmare. I was just rebellious, lived on a commune. I was Miss NASCAR. I mean, my poor mother, she went through the ringer. And then I met my kid's dad, my ex-husband, when I went to school in Georgia. And he was just a lot. He was a lot like my dad, very narcissistic. Like I'm very good friends with him now, but it took a long time to like forgive him. But I just didn't know that I would pick somebody like my father, you know? And then we got divorced when I was like maybe 35. And my kids were little, and he had his own journey. I mean, he was on the streets and he was homeless, and I had to get restraining orders, and I had the kids living with me at my mom's while I was, trying to like pay for my children. And my son had a lot of struggles financially, I mean, like health wise. And my daughter was a rower, and I had that whole thing being a single mom, raising them without him, without any money, living at my mom's. And like that's when I really started doing a lot of like I was really in survival mode. I really didn't have a chance to really do a lot of soul searching, but I noticed my patterns. I definitely noticed my patterns, that I was a sabotager. And I was like, where is this coming from? Why would I sabotage everything? Like, why don't I think I'm pretty enough or good enough or smart enough or anything? Like, what is this? And so I rededicated my life when I was like 35 years old to the Lord. And that really began my journey of healing my heart, through like his love. It wasn't anything I could have fixed on my own. And I just started watching different podcasts and started really like listening to that voice. And so, my kids got older. My daughter became an Olympic rower at like 17. She got a full scholarship to Berkeley. I didn't really date while they were little kids because I didn't want to like make any mistakes. And their dad was starting to come around when she went to college. She didn't actually get to row on the Olympic team because she got injured. And so my son was like this amazing videographer. He was like insane, like got hired by all these different people, like at a young age. And he just was thriving. And I got remarried when my son was 16. My daughter went to college. And he was also a lot like my dad. And so that began even another like, oh my God, I did it again. How did I do it again? So in 2020, when COVID happened, he was just so busy, like, doing whatever he was doing. His dad died, and he really never paid very much attention to me too. I just accepted crumbs, just like I did with my dad. Like when I would go visit him in prison, he would just give me crumbs because I didn't think I was worthy of like anything more. But when I started writing the book, I remember the first time I had this revelation, because I'd kept journals for years of all the, therapy and inner healing and landmark and LifeSpring and all the different courses to figure out what the frick is wrong with me. I was like, there's something really wrong with me. And I got all these journals and I started like putting it together how I was going to write the book. And it was when I wrote this one sentence. I wrote, my dad did not leave me. He just left. And the minute I heard that, I was like, that's it. That's it. He didn't leave me. He just left. And it didn't have anything to do with me being not enough for him. It was his own choices, his own narcissistic choices. And, it was like, my goal with the book wasn't just to tell my whole crazy life story. It was for people to read the book and say, wow, like, I don't want anybody to make the mistakes I've made. I don't want them to be in their 50s like, whoa, why didn't I get this in my 20s? It's okay, because when you get older, like, but through all that, like living at my mom's and the whole thing, I got my master's in education. I became a school teacher. I got my real estate license. I was also a realtor. So I just pressed in hard because I knew there wasn't really any other chance. And you got to overcome, because I'm their mom. They needed me. Sometimes your kids are the people that make you be your best self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said around the line in your book that you wrote that really shifted your sort of your mindset, right? That he didn't leave you, he just left. That realization that it wasn't you, there was nothing wrong with you. It was what was going on in his life. And I think a lot of people right? They often do personalize or internalize the things that are happening around their world, the way people are interacting with them. And they don't stop to think like, maybe it's not about me. Maybe it has nothing to do with me. Maybe it's something that's going on in their lives. And to be able to separate yourself from that, right? Those sorts of things and say, it's not me. There's nothing wrong with me, has nothing to do with me. They've got their own stuff going on and I'm okay. Right. So I love that you've shared that.
Kid, especially when they're a kid. They're a kid.
Yeah.
You're a kid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. I do want to talk and ask you a little bit about so what you're doing now because I know you wrote the book, you've got the
Yeah.
documentary out there, and I know you're working on things. There's still things that you're working on today,
Yeah.
and I would love to hear
Yeah.
a little bit more about the things that you're working on right now.
So I have a website. It's www.yougotdaddyissues.com. And so after the first book, and then I republished the second book, and then I didn't make any money on the documentary, I was like, oh my God, like, what the heck? I was like, I can either be pitiful or powerful. I can like have this be part of like resilience, or I can just curl up in a hole. And I said, I can't do that. Like, there's a lot of little girls out there like me that need help. And so I made the website and I said, what do I want to do? So I have a good friends of mine that are called Beyond Borders Ministries, and they build churches. Their daughter actually passed away like 10 years ago. And instead of crawling in a hole, they started building churches all over impoverished neighborhoods in Mexico. So I went with them to build a church for their daughter. Their daughter's name was Hannah. And all these little kids were playing with like rocks out in the dirt. And I was like, they need a soccer field. How could I help them get a soccer field? So I said, oh, well, okay. I can still sell real estate. I can teach school next year. I can make some money doing that. And I can create my own coffee cart and call it Daddy Issues Cafe. And I can start booking events at places where a lot of lost people are out there like me. And when I used to go to Grateful Dead shows, I was out of my mind. They need somebody with wisdom there that aren't just trying to like, hey, buy this. Like, I want to call it a cafe where I minister to people that, have a history like me and give them hope. And like, they don't need to take drugs and, do crazy stuff. You're like, this isn't going to go anywhere good. This doesn't ever end well. I can promise you that. And be an inspiration to them and take 10% of that money and start find that first church that we went to, and I'll partner with Beyond Borders and build the first field called a daddy field. And it's going to be a place where kids can play with their dads at a soccer field in a place like would never get anything like that. And to be able to bring a community around a church that can help them and maybe bring some income in those areas, like that's a big like push for me for sure.
Wow, I love that. I love what you're doing, and to be able to provide that right to areas that would not, otherwise have the funding to be able to have something like that. And I love how you brought in sort of the daddy part, that it's a place where kids can play with their dads. I love that so much. It's
Oh,
awesome.
thank
I
you.
love what you're doing. So thank you for doing this work. And I love the little cafes that you've got going on to raise the funds for this, to be able
I
to
haven't built
continue
it
to
yet,
share
but
your
I have the
message.
money. I
Okay.
haven't got it yet. It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm just going to start to wrap up, but we've had such an amazing conversation, and I really appreciate you being on and sharing your story because it's an amazing one.
Thank you so much
And
for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, I do want to open it up. Is there any final message that you have for our audience today? Anything else that you'd like to share?
I do. So besides buying my book, which you can, and go watch The Invisible Pilot, the most important thing I can tell you from my personal journey is don't let your mess in your life define who you are. Let your mess be your message to give hope to others, because the very thing that you went through that you thought would destroy you is the very thing that's going to save somebody else just like you. And that's the goal. That's where we all have a unique purpose, because we all have unique stories. And our goal in life is to go get other people out of the pit and bring them up so that they realize that they have meaning and that they matter and that what they've been through is not in vain. So let your mess be your message. That's what I want to tell them.
Oh, I love that. Let your mess be your message. I love that so much. And I love what,
Thank you.
you know, just that message of taking, you know, the challenges that you've had, turning those around, turning it into a positive message of hope for others, lifting people up. I love what you do so much. And thank you so much again for being on with me today and sharing this.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
I invite you to subscribe to the Embrace, Balance, Discover Joy podcast and join our community. If you feel inspired by what you hear, please leave a review and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And remember, it's never too late to embrace balance and discover joy in your life. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes filled with inspiring stories and valuable insights. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.